A little birdie told me that when you were a little girl, you actually met Elvis.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you remember that? Do you remember?
It wasn't actually, you don't really meet Elvis, you actually just look at Elvis, okay? My mother sang with Elvis for years.
Yeah.
She and her group, they were called the Sweet Inspirations. Yeah. They also sang for Aretha for many, many years. On most of the, in the 60s, they were on all of Aretha songs. Well, Elvis took a liking to them, and my mom sang with him for many years. And they were very close.
Yeah.
I just remember at one point being in a room, and we were all in this room, my mother and the singers, and we, the usually backstage kind of thing. And he just walks in the room with his mink on, with his glasses on.
Oh my God.
And he just walks in, he says something, and everybody just, you don't say anything, you just look. It was just one of those moments I won't forget as a kid.
Oh my
it wasn't
God.
like, hi, Mr. Elvis, nice to meet you. You didn't do that. You just sat back and just looked at him.
Amazing.
Amazing to look at.
Yeah.
Just amazing.
Wow.
And just to be in his presence was awesome.
This book, as I've mentioned, has very detailed accounts of Secretary Rumsfeld's encounters with all sorts of public figures, world leaders, people in very influential and important positions. But maybe one of the most intriguing is your encounter with Elvis. Why don't you tell us about that?
Oh, my goodness, Elvis Presley. On any given Sunday today, if Joyce and I can't get to church, we have some Elvis Presley tapes singing gospel, and they are wonderful. And we play them Sunday after Sunday after Sunday. Then he would sing a ballad, and it was absolutely beautiful. I mean, this man had a voice that was spectacular. And I love country music, and I love ballads, and he would sing, and it would just, you'd be carried away with it. Then he'd take the scarf, wipe his face, the sweat off, and throw it out in the crowd, and everyone would scream. So he threw one to Altavis Davis, and Altavis gave it to Joyce, and it's framed. And way off in the corner, Elvis Presley had me cornered. I was against the corner, and he's big, and he was like this, and I was kind of hidden right behind him. He was talking about the United States Army. If you remember, there was a draft during that period, and some of the people did not go in the draft. They went to Canada or they refused, and he went in and served in the United States Army, and he served in Germany, and he wanted to talk about it. He loved the Army, he valued his time serving, and he was sitting there going back and forth with me about this and that and the other thing, and I just found it fascinating that here was this man who a minute ago had been up there wiping the sweat off his face and throwing these things and everyone screaming, and here were all these gorgeous women walking around this dressing room, and he was standing there asking me question after question about the United States Army. It says a lot for the man.
You were a very good friend with Elvis, weren't you?
I loved him. I loved the man. You know, when the first time I ever met him, he came to see my show. He came to see my show first before I saw him. And believe me, it took me a good 10 minutes to quieten the audience down once I introduced him. He stood up and he had a cape on, and he opened this cape up as he stood in the booth in Las Vegas with this cape open, you know, like Batman. And the audience went absolutely berserk. And I said, shh, this is my show. No, I couldn't quieten them down, not for 10 minutes. So I brought out some of my big gun songs, you know, to try and quieten them, which I did in the end. And he came backstage and he said, what a hell of a show. Thank you very much. And thank you for introducing. This is how humble he was. He says, thank you for introducing me. He said, wow, Elvis, you know. I said, Elvis, I can't tell you how I thank you for being in my show. You know, that's number one. But he was such a nice guy.
Talk to you today about Elvis Presley.
You did?
Yes.
I loved Elvis Presley. When I was a boy, people used to think I looked like him. I had a big Elvis hair, you know. I did, seriously. I loved him.
Well, NBC.
There were two icons in the 50s that made all the difference in our lives. There was Elvis Presley and James Dean. And they had a profound effect on our culture. And they still do. It's amazing, isn't it? It was overwhelming, you know, because Elvis was the first male singer that was equally loved by boys and girls. I mean, I'm going back to the 50s, you know, when I was growing up as a teenager in Ohio, and we took our music very serious. And when we spent a nickel to hear a song, you know, in a jukebox at a restaurant or a club, why, it was big, you know. And there was no hesitation with Elvis, for boys and girls. You know, very often the boys would prefer a girl singer, Patti Page, or any one of those that were popular at the time. And the girls would always go for Perry Como and Frank Sinatra and all, until Elvis came, and Elvis kind of brought us together. There was no hesitation with playing Elvis's stuff on either side, boys and girls. He was unbelievable. He was revolutionary, you know. I mean, he just changed the way we listened, and had a profound effect on all of us, culturally and musically and emotionally and spiritually, everything. Yeah. Still miss him, man. You know, it's hard to believe he's gone because there's so much still reflective of him, you know.
Absolutely. Now, he was definitely one of the first rock and roll stars to cross over into doing movies.
It is my honor to welcome the legendary star of stage, screen, and television, Angela Lansbury. Let's talk a little about Elvis Presley. You were 7 years older, I think, but you played his mother in Blue Hawaii. What was that experience like?
Well, I was obviously awed by you know, being in the presence, and but he was an awfully nice young man in those days. He always was a wonderfully nice young man, very caring person. He had his terrible problems, a very personal nature, but in those days he'd just come out of the army. He was fit, he was slender, and he was at top of his form. And he couldn't have been nicer to me. We had a lovely time. It was a wonderful location. We were on Kauai in the Hawaiian Islands. I'll never forget it. It was really wonderful.
Did you get to spend much time with him?
Yes, we sat around the set, and I had some wonderful scenes with the man who played my husband, and the three of us, you know, together. And she was such a funny character, you know. Her whole reaction to her son, who she didn't understand at all, you know. She was a real kind of Southern belle type, you know, and she was going on, give me some sugar, honey, you know, kind of thing. And he loved it. He thought it was terribly funny. He was very sweet.
Presley years ago wanted to record my song, I Will Always Love You. He had it worked up and had planned to do it and was in town to do the session. And his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, who was a brilliant man, by the way, he called to say at the last minute that they only recorded songs that they had half the publishing on. And I wouldn't give them half the publishing because I couldn't, because that's just stuff that I plan to keep for my family and to keep in my own catalog. And so that meant that Elvis didn't get to sing the song. Hopefully he was as disappointed as I was, because he loved the song and I wanted to hear him sing it, but that was just one of those business decisions that I had to make, and I don't blame Colonel Tom, but I still wish I could have heard Elvis sing I Will Always Love You.
I met Elvis when I was on Laugh-In, so I was sort of in that world over there.
So he came on the show or just visited?
He came on. He was on the set because we used to rehearse in the studio at NBC. Yeah. And in walks this guy, and he was so beautiful that it just took my breath away, everybody's breath away. And he walked up to me and he tousled my hair and he said, "You look like a chicken that's just been hatched." And I didn't know what to think. I thought it was a compliment, but my God, I've never met a guy with more charisma in my life. Bet. He was the guy who basically turned on, you know when jeans turn on and off, you say, well, when your jeans turn on, there's certain things in your jeans. Well, my hormones turned on.
Really?
And he did that turn on for my hormones.
He kick-started you?
He kick-started my hormones.
Well, of course he did. He's Elvis Presley,
well,
the king of rock and roll.
I was 18 years old and in love with Elvis. You know, totally in love with Elvis. And he melted my heart to meet him in person.
Elvis, right in the thick of his up-and-coming fame, was put into the Army. And he came back from the Army, and that was the Welcome Back show. I believe, if my memory serves me correct, that's about 1960.
It turned out to be a very, very cute moment in history, I think, with the two of them singing.
We work in the same way, only in different areas. Love me tender, love me sweet, never let me go. You have made my life complete, and I love you so. Those fingers in my hair, like come hither stare, that strips my conscience bare, it's witchcraft. Love me tender, love me true.
He loved to do stuff like that and put himself next to the most important singer of the day, you know, rock and roll singer of the day.
I think both guys, and I could say this with some authority, both of them were nervous.
I'm sure both of them were shaking in their shoes and boots, respective, but I like that about my dad, that he could do that.
For my darling, I love you. It's pretty all the time, Frank.
Sure does, buddy.
And I always will.
The time you met Elvis Presley.
Elvis Presley.
This I thought was lovely. This is a great story.
This would, you know, it was about 1972, so I was not famous, you know, and I was working in Vegas, opening for Anne Margaret, you know, and they knew each other. They had worked together.
Right.
And I thank Anne Margaret and her husband Roger Smith for hiring me because I had a weird act. And
like what kind of stuff were you doing then?
I'll show you. This was one of my bits. Like I had sort of like a funny magic act, and this was one of the bits I did. I would say, and now, ladies and gentlemen, the napkin trick. I go like this, and I'd really drag this out, you know. And I'd bow, and I'd, you know, thank you. And following Anne Margaret in, the next week was Elvis Presley, and he came in to see the show that night. And so now the show's over, and we're all in our dressing rooms afterwards, and I look down the hall, and I see this beautiful woman coming down the hall, and it's Priscilla, his wife. And then she sort of, I have no idea, it's Priscilla. Anyway, she peels away, and then there's Elvis, and he's all in white with this black hair, and he's got that huge, this is the thin Elvis, by the way. He looks great. He's got this beautiful diamond buckle, you know, that celebrates his appearances at the Hilton Hotel. And he walks by me, and he sees me, and I'm kind of like this, and he says, "Son, you have an oblique sense of humor." Oblique.